reflection on everything that I've gained from when I entered here August 2020 until today, which is in 2025. People understand how to live life, how to survive, and how to make things happen. I came into public health at a master's level with no academic history. And I say that because I have lived experience. And while you might not have known it was public health, it was public health. For example, social determinants of health, right? So I remember growing up in a school where the only people who looked like me in the whole elementary school were my sisters, who were 4 years apart. And I remember the first time someone assaulted me, and I have a scar here because I was Black. I remember the first time parents wouldn't let their kids play with me because I was Black. I remember being called the N-word and being told by the principal that I probably provoked the individual in fourth grade. I remember having to navigate all those things and coming home angry and confused. And my father said, "Kid, I understand." So my parents grew up in Brooklyn. They were born in 56, and they were part of integrating their schools. So, they had books and bricks and things thrown at them from on top of the stairs. He said, "I understand the struggle, but the reality is we could have bought a bigger, better house in the area where most of us live, but they lack access to resources. Poor access to police protection, poor access to grocery stores, and poor access to resources needed for education." And while that would have been nice, we realized that if we send you where all our kids are, it's easy to restrict access to knowledge and resources. Whereas if we put you where their kids are, they're not going to hinder their kids to get to 3 of you. And we made the decision, meaning him and my mom, to put you in a school where you would navigate this, which you'll navigate for the rest of your life. Now you'll gain the tools than when you're older, and you won't have a falsehood of always being surrounded, because that's not the reality. So fast forward, we go into place, right? Walkability. Our cousins used to come up every summer because we had an acre of land, we had a pool, we were allowed to play with the neighborhood kids. So we were outside all day, whether we were up the street at the park, walking to the corner store, walking to a friend's house. And then when we go visit my grandmother who lived on the 15th floor in Brooklyn, and you'd be like, pop, pop, pop. And we're suburban. They called us country mice. We were like, oh, there's fireworks. And we're running to the windows, and they're like, these are not fireworks. So we weren't allowed outside to go to the park. We weren't allowed to go down to the grocery store. We spent most of our time in the house. And so while our cousins were growing up with vitamin D deficiencies, we didn't have those issues. And being able to have access to just go outside and play and feel safe and not have to worry was a thing. And I realized the benefit of that. And then so that's your built environment. And then you have my grandmother who lived in Brooklyn and was told, you're just getting older, you need to rest. And then you move her where we are for our doctors, and you have stage 3 cancer. My previous grandmother died from cancer because they did the same thing to her. But the crazy part is, if my grandma was 64 when that happened, and my parents, she was less than 50 years old when they were doing that to her, which now we know is gaslighting, right? Like, something's wrong with you. At 50 years old, you need to retire, my aunt found her at 16. So my dad was born in 56. My aunt was born in 60. And she was 16 years old. So somewhere in the 70s, before the 80s, before I was even born, they were telling my granny, who was my dad didn't even graduate high school yet, that she She was the issue and it was all in her brain, and she wound up dying from cancer. And I find that those things are very important because we have to realize when we come here, we learn all this stuff. When we go into the community, we need to be humble and wise and understanding. Just because they don't know the terms doesn't mean they don't know the extent of how all this stuff affects them. And that it's our job to educate them on ways to advocate and navigate the barriers that have been provided. And that's not even just Black and brown communities, because you have women who have issues navigating health. You have people who are dealing with kids with disabilities who can't get access to education, or your kid's the one who has to go in the back of the school and use the ramp by the garbage because there's access. My old elementary school was recently closed because they couldn't have access to those who were in wheelchairs. And because the building was so old, you couldn't build elevators and do all the things. And so they just moved the school. And so we need to make sure that when we as practitioners going in, that I don't just see I'm brown, you're brown, so let's vibe, and I know your struggle. It's I'm an individual and you're an individual, and let me sit down and understand what you're going through and what you need and how I can help you. And that's also important because when I was doing my anthropology research and I had to do listening sessions, it's easy. And I was doing with Black women, you would think, oh, it's going to be easy. It's, sisterhood. But the reality was I had advantages and outward appearances that could create a boundary, right? So now I'm a researcher coming in, poking at you, asking you about some things that are very personal. I'm also an individual who's highly educated when some of these people didn't get to graduate school. Now, we had several different ones. We had one with all women over 60, all masters or above. So that was fine. We had younger females who were, and I say younger because I was over 40 at the time. So these girls were like 25, the ones who went from high school to undergrad to grad, or PhD, master's or PhD. So we vibed because we were, we went to the same school, we understood each other, and we were able to talk. But then we went to two places where we had to be mindful. One was an office where the women who all had disabilities that prevented them from being able to work, take care of their kids, and take care of their health. So they were dependent at the moment on services. And here you coming in, and the way that I speak and the way I carry myself prior military, the words that I use and the demeanor I have can be confused for being stuffy or acting white or being better than, when in actuality, I had the struggle of having to become that just to be even considered. But though people don't see that backstory, and so you can be othered in a room, right? And so finding a way to connect universally, whether you're Black and I'm Black, or you're male and I'm female, or whatever the situation is, because we're going to get all kinds of people when we do our practitioner work or our research, to find the humanity in the people and find a way to connect. Because I'm walking around with a kid and I could be dealing with people who can't have kids. So being mindful of that. Or I could be dealing with people who lost their kids due to violence. And so just being mindful of, when you're dealing with individuals, humility, wisdom, empathy, compassion, humor, and a willingness to give a piece of yourself in order for them to feel safe is what we need.